The hall was filled with lights and voices. Cameras flashed from every corner, and people whispered to each other with excitement. Everyone was waiting for one man. When Keanu Reeves finally walked onto the stage, the entire room fell into silence. His presence was calm, not forced, and there was no pride in his step. He looked like a man who carried both sorrow and hope in his heart. People stood up, clapping loudly, but Keanu only smiled softly and placed his hand on his chest, as if to say, "Thank you." In that small gesture, many felt a wave of humility, something rare in a world of fame and noise. Keanu did not speak right away. Instead, he looked at the audience with patient eyes. It was as if he wanted to remind them that silence itself had meaning. When he finally began, his voice was gentle, almost quiet, yet every word carried weight. He spoke about kindness, not as a grand idea, but as a choice in small moments. He said that life can break people in ways no one sees, and sometimes the smallest gesture can save someone without the world ever knowing. The crowd leaned forward, listening, because it was not just a speech. It was a confession of a man who had lived through storms. Then came a moment no one expected. As Keanu spoke, a young boy in a wheelchair near the front row dropped a notebook he had been holding tightly. The notebook fell under the barrier, just out of his reach. Security moved forward quickly, but Keanu stopped mid-sentence. Without hesitation, he stepped down from the stage. The cameras followed as he walked past the flashing lights and bent down to pick up the notebook. He knelt beside the boy, handed it to him, and whispered something only the boy could hear. The boy's eyes filled with tears, and his small hands shook as he nodded. The audience gasped. This was not part of the show. This was real. People who watched from their seats began to feel something stir inside them. Some whispered to each other, wondering what Keanu had said. Others sat in silence, their hearts heavy with emotion. The boy's mother covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. Keanu placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder before standing again. He did not make a scene of it, did not wait for applause, and did not speak of what had happened. He simply returned to the stage and continued as if nothing had interrupted him. But the hall was not the same anymore. There was a stillness, a deep respect because they all knew they had witnessed a kindness that could not be scripted. Later, one of the organizers whispered to a friend that the boy had been struggling for months, feeling invisible in a world that moved too fast. And yet, in that single act, Keanu had made him feel seen, not as a charity case, but as a person of worth. Word spread quickly through the crowd, and by the time the event ended, many people had tears in their eyes. Some said they had come to see a movie star, but instead walked away having seen a lesson in humanity. Others admitted they felt ashamed, realizing how often they had ignored the struggles of people around them. But Keanu was not done. As he left the stage, he noticed a worker in the corner quietly gathering cables, a man no one else had paid attention to. Keanu stopped, thanked him for his effort, and shook his hand. Cameras caught the moment, but Keanu never looked toward them. His attention was only on the worker. Once again, he reminded the world that true respect does not depend on position or fame. It depends on the heart. The hall emptied slowly, but the story did not stay there. People shared videos online, and the kindness spread across the world. Comments poured in from strangers who felt inspired to do something good in their own lives. Some said they smiled at someone they usually ignored. Others said they called their parents after months of silence. The ripple of one man's kindness touched thousands of unseen lives. And yet, when asked about it later, Keanu only said, "I just did what felt right." Those words left people speechless, because in their simplicity they carried the weight of truth. This was only the beginning. No one knew that the boy in the wheelchair, the worker backstage, and even strangers who had watched online would soon become part of a chain of events that revealed the true power of kindness. And through it all, Keanu would show the world that humility and resilience were not just words, but a way of life. The night after the event, the world was still talking. Videos of Keanu kneeling beside the boy had reached millions of screens. Headlines called it a moment of pure humanity. People argued that it was more powerful than any award speech or red carpet appearance. Strangers who had never met Keanu said they felt as if he had spoken directly to them. Kindness, they said, was not something he preached about. It was something he lived. But while the internet buzzed, Keanu sat quietly in a small hotel room. There was no celebration, no party, only silence. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights outside the window. His face was calm, but his heart carried memories that no one else could see. People saw the kindness he gave, but they did not know the losses that had shaped him. He thought of the family he had lost, of friends who had slipped away, of nights when pain made him question the meaning of life. Those moments had taught him that fame fades, but kindness remains. The boy in the wheelchair, whose name was Ethan, could not sleep either. He clutched the notebook Keanu had returned to him. Inside were pages filled with sketches of heroes, stories of brave men who stood up when the world ignored them. Ethan had dreamed of meeting a hero, but he never thought the hero would step down from a stage just to kneel beside him. Ethan's mother watched him with tears, whispering that maybe, just maybe, this moment had changed something inside her son. The next morning, a call came to the event organizers. Ethan's story had spread further than anyone expected. A teacher from his school reached out saying the boy had been bullied for months. Classmates had mocked his chair, his silence, and his quiet way of drawing. But now the same classmates were asking about him, curious about what Keanu had whispered. The teacher said, "One act of kindness from a stranger has done what years of teaching could not." It made children see Ethan differently. Meanwhile, the worker Keanu had thanked Backstage returned home with a story he thought no one would believe. His name was Raj, and he lived in a small apartment far from the glamorous world of the event. That night, he sat with his daughter and told her how Keanu had stopped to shake his hand. She laughed at first, thinking her father was joking. But when she saw the short video online, her eyes widened. "Dad," she said, "you're important. You always told me no one notices people like us. But he noticed you." Raj smiled, and for the first time in months, he felt proud of himself. As days passed, the ripple grew wider. A stranger in another country, watching the video late at night, decided not to end his own life because Keanu's act reminded him that kindness still existed. A nurse working long hours said she felt seen when she watched the video, and the next day she treated her patients with new energy. No one could measure how many hearts were touched, but the world was different, even if only in small ways. Keanu, however, continued his life quietly. Reporters chased him with questions, but he always answered the same. "It was nothing. I only did what anyone should do." Still, deep inside, he knew it was not nothing. He had seen the boy's tears. He had seen the mother's trembling hands. He had seen the workers' humble eyes. Those moments reminded him why he always chose humility over fame. But soon, something unexpected happened. Ethan's family received an anonymous letter with no name signed. Inside was a message that said, "Heroes are not in movies, they are in kindness." Along with the note was a ticket to a special film premiere, reserved for Ethan and his mother. When they arrived, they found out it was Keanu who had arranged it quietly, without telling the world. As Ethan entered the theater, the crowd stood, not for the actors, but for him. Keanu walked up, bent down once more, and said, "You belong here too." The cameras flashed, but this time it was Ethan who held the spotlight. For the first time in his life, he did not feel invisible. He felt seen, respected, and strong. Yet the story was far from over. The world thought it had witnessed the greatest act of kindness. But Keanu's journey was about to cross paths with another soul in pain. Someone who would test his resilience and reveal just how deep kindness could go. The premiere night ended with applause. But for Ethan, it was more than just an evening. It was the first time he saw people clapping for him, not out of pity, but out of respect. When he went home, he wrote in his notebook, "Today, I was not invisible. Today, I was part of the world." His mother read the words silently, her heart trembling. She knew the boy she once feared was fading into loneliness now had a spark again. Keanu, however, slipped out of the theater quietly, avoiding the cameras. He preferred shadows to spotlights. Outside, a cold breeze moved through the streets, and as he walked, he noticed a young woman sitting alone on the sidewalk. Her clothes were worn, her eyes red from crying. Most people walked past her without a glance, but Keanu stopped. He asked softly, "Are you all right?" The woman shook her head. She explained her name was Clara. Life had broken her in ways too heavy for her to carry. She had lost her job, her home, and even her family had turned away. She had come to the city hoping for help, but found only closed doors. Tears fell as she whispered, "People see me, but they don't look at me. It's like I'm not even human anymore." Keanu listened without interrupting. He sat beside her on the cold pavement, not caring about the cameras that might find him. He told her, "You are human and you matter. Sometimes the world forgets, but that does not mean you should forget yourself." Clara stared at him, unable to believe that a man the world admired was sitting with her, treating her like she mattered. A passerby recorded the moment. But again, Keanu did not pose or perform. He simply took out his wallet and handed Clara some money. But more importantly, he gave her his contact through the organizers. "This is not charity," he said gently. "This is respect. Let me help you stand again." The video spread online within hours. Some called it another act of kindness, but what no one saw was the deeper effect. Clara did not just take the help and vanish. She began to rebuild her life. Weeks later, she found a small job, then a safe place to live. She carried Keanu's words in her heart, repeating them whenever she felt weak. "You are human, and you matter." Meanwhile, Ethan's story continued to ripple. The classmates who once mocked him now asked him to draw for the school magazine. Teachers noticed his confidence growing. He started to speak more, no longer hiding behind silence. His mother often said, "All of this began because one man chose kindness." Raj, the worker who had been thanked backstage, also saw changes in his life. His daughter began telling her friends that her father was important, that he was not just a man carrying cables. Her pride gave him strength. One night, Raj told his wife, "I never thought shaking one hand could change how I see myself." But it did. But the real twist came when Clara, Ethan, and Raj's stories began to connect. None of them knew each other yet, but their lives were slowly being pulled together by the invisible thread of Keanu's actions. Kindness was creating a chain, and every link was stronger than the last. The world was watching closely. Interviews, articles, and endless headlines tried to capture the reason behind these moments. But Keanu stayed quiet, refusing to take credit. "It's not about me," he said once. "It's about remembering that every person we meet carries a story we do not see." Yet, behind his calm face, Keanu carried his own struggles. He often walked alone at night, thinking about the pain he had endured, the people he had lost, and the silent battles he fought every day. What he gave to the world was kindness. But what the world did not know was how much strength it cost him to keep giving. Soon, he would face a moment that tested him more deeply than any other. A moment when kindness would demand not just a gesture, but sacrifice. And the world would once again fall silent, watching how one man's humility could shake hearts across the globe. The world was still talking about Clara's recovery and Ethan's courage when a new challenge appeared, one that would test Keanu more than ever before. It began, quietly, with a message sent to the organizers of his event. A hospital from a small town reached out, explaining that they had a patient who had asked for only one thing before a dangerous surgery: to meet Keanu Reeves, even if, just for a few minutes. The patient was a teenage girl named Maya. She had been fighting a serious illness for years. Doctors said the surgery could save her, but it was risky, and her chances were uncertain. She told the nurses that movies gave her strength, especially the ones where Keanu played characters who fought against impossible odds. "If I can just meet him," she said softly, "I will have enough courage to face this." When the request reached Keanu, he was in the middle of a busy schedule. Studios expected him to appear at interviews, and contracts tied him to important events. But Keanu did not hesitate. He canceled everything and arranged to visit the hospital quietly, without cameras or news. When he entered Maya's room, she looked up with wide eyes, unable to believe it was real. Her body was weak, but her spirit lit up as if someone had opened a window to let the sun inside. Keanu walked to her bedside, sat down, and held her hand. "You are stronger than me," he whispered. "I pretend to be brave in movies. But you are brave in real life." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She told him about the pain, the nights of fear, and the times she thought she could not go on. Keanu listened, never rushing her, never interrupting. Then he shared his own struggles, speaking of loss and grief that had once broken him. He said, "Pain can make us feel alone, but it also makes us understand others more deeply. That is why kindness matters, because we never know how heavy someone's battle is." The nurses watched silently from the doorway, their eyes wet. One of them whispered, "This is not just a visit. This is a gift of courage." Before leaving, Keanu gave Maya a small note, written in his own handwriting. It said, "Every day you fight, you're writing a story greater than any movie. Never forget that." He folded the paper and placed it gently into her hand. The surgery happened 2 days later. It was long and difficult. Doctors fought for hours. Outside the waiting room, Keanu sat with Maya's parents, holding their hands when they shook. He did not leave even when reporters found out and tried to gather. He told them, "This is not about me. This is about her." After many tense hours, the doctors finally came out with tired smiles. The surgery had succeeded. Maya would need time to recover, but the hardest part was over. When the parents broke down in relief, Keanu stepped back, giving them space, his own eyes shining with quiet emotion. News of his presence spread, but what mattered most was Maya's recovery. The note he had given her stayed by her bedside every day. She would later say that it was not the surgery alone that saved her. It was the courage he gave her to face it. But this act of kindness also created a storm. Some people praised him as a true hero, while others accused him of using kindness as publicity. Critics questioned his motives, saying no one could be that humble. Keanu, however, stayed silent. He never defended himself, never fought back. Instead, he said only, "People can believe what they want. I will continue to do what feels right." The criticism grew louder, testing his patience, but his resilience shone through. For him, the truth was simple. Kindness did not need to be explained. And soon, the same people who doubted him would witness something that proved once again why the world respected him beyond the screen. After Maya's surgery, the world celebrated her recovery, but the noise of critics grew louder. Talk shows debated whether Keanu's actions were genuine. Some voices said, "No actor is this humble. He must be doing it for attention." Others said, "He only shows kindness when cameras are near." Keanu heard these words, but he never answered them. Instead, he continued with his life in silence. To him, kindness was never a performance. It was a choice. But the weight of the criticism did not go unnoticed. Friends advised him to release a statement to defend his reputation. Still, Keanu refused. "If kindness needs defense," he said quietly, "then it was never kindness." One evening, as he walked through a crowded street, he saw posters of himself in shop windows. His movies were everywhere, but the faces of the people around him told a different story. A homeless man sat near a bench ignored by hundreds of passers-by. A mother carried groceries while her small child cried with hunger. No cameras pointed at them. No headlines followed their lives. Keanu stopped, bought food for the mother, and shared warm clothes with the homeless man. No one knew, no one recorded, but those moments reminded him why he continued. But the storm was not over. A journalist decided to challenge him directly. During an interview for a new film, the reporter asked, "People say your kindness is just an act. Do you want to prove them wrong?" The audience held their breath, waiting for Keanu's answer. He looked down for a moment, then raised his eyes calmly. "I do not want to prove anything," he said. "If people think kindness is an act, then let it be. But if even one person feels seen, even one person feels less alone because of what I did, then I am satisfied." The hall fell silent. No one expected such an answer. The reporter, caught off guard, had no words. And for the first time, the audience realized that Keanu was not defending himself. He was defending the value of kindness itself. Outside the studio, people were waiting. Among them was Clara, the woman he had once helped on the sidewalk. She had come to thank him in person, this time with steady eyes and a proud smile. "I have a job now," she said, "and a place to live. You told me I mattered. I believe it now." Standing beside her was Raj, the worker he had once shaken hands with. He said, "My daughter looks at me differently now. She believes in me. That is because of you." And then Ethan appeared in his wheelchair, notebook still in his lap. "I draw heroes," he said softly, "but I know now, heroes are real." The crowd watched as 3 lives, Clara, Raj, and Ethan, stood together, proof that kindness had created something no rumor could destroy. Their voices carried more weight than any headline. But the story was not finished. As the critics fell silent, a new challenge waited in the shadows. This time, it would not be about one person in need. It would be about an entire community, broken by loss and struggle. And once again, the world would see how far Keanu's kindness could reach. The storm of criticism had ended, and the voices of Clara, Raj, and Ethan had reminded the world of what true kindness meant. But life was preparing a test that was far greater than anything before. One morning, news spread of a small town struck by tragedy. A factory accident had left dozens of families without fathers, brothers, and sons. The town was poor, already struggling, and now it faced grief too heavy to carry. Children cried outside their broken homes. Mothers tried to be strong but could not hide their pain. The world moved on quickly, as it often does, but Keanu did not. He heard about the town through a letter written by a teacher there. The teacher explained, "These families feel forgotten. They have lost hope. They need someone to remind them that the world still cares." Without hesitation, Keanu traveled to the town quietly. No cameras followed him, no reporters expected him. When he arrived, the people stared in disbelief. Many had only seen him on screens, never in real life. But here he was, walking down their dusty roads, listening to their stories. He met a boy whose father had died in the accident. The boy held a small toy car in his hand, saying, "Dad promised me we would play together again. Now he's gone." Tears rolled down Keanu's face as he knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "Your father's love is still with you," he said softly, "and I promise you, you will not face this alone." Then he gathered the families in the school hall. He spoke, not as a star, but as a man who understood loss. He told them about the pain of losing his own loved ones. He said, "Grief is heavy, and it makes us feel like the world has ended. But together, we can carry it. And with kindness, we can build again." After listening, he acted. He set up a fund quietly, without announcing his name, to help rebuild homes and support education for the children. He stayed with the families for days, eating simple food with them, walking through the ruins, and giving them more than money. He gave them presents. The people of the town began to feel something they had almost forgotten: dignity. They no longer felt invisible. They felt seen, respected, and valued. One mother said through tears, "He reminded us that we are not forgotten." News of his visit eventually leaked, but Keanu never spoke about it. When asked later by a reporter why he went there, he only said, "Because they needed someone. If we wait for the world to act, we may wait forever. But if we choose to act ourselves, hope can begin again." The story spread across the globe. It was not just about one act of kindness anymore. It was about how kindness could heal entire communities. People in other countries began starting small movements inspired by his example. Some collected money for local families in need. Others gave time to volunteer in shelters, but Keanu himself did not celebrate. As he left the town, he walked quietly, his eyes heavy with both sorrow and strength. He knew the test of kindness was never over. Life would always bring new pain, new struggles, and new voices calling out for help. Still, he carried one belief inside him, even in the darkest places. A single act of kindness could light a fire that others would carry forward, and soon, the world would witness the final chapter, where all the lives he touched, from Ethan to Clara to Raj to Maya, and even the grieving town, would come together in one unforgettable moment that no one would ever forget. Months passed, but the stories of Keanu's kindness never stopped traveling. People spoke about Ethan, the boy in the wheelchair whose confidence grew because of a notebook. They remembered Raj, the worker whose daughter learned to see her father as a hero. They remembered Clara, who found her life again after being seen on the sidewalk. They remembered Maya, who survived a dangerous surgery with courage written on a folded piece of paper. And now they remembered the grieving town, lifted back to hope by one man's presence. What no one expected was how all these lives would one day meet in the same place. A charity organization arranged a gathering called the Night of Hope. It was meant to honor people who had shown extraordinary kindness. When Keanu was invited, he tried to refuse quietly. "I am not the story," he said. But the organizers explained that this was not about him alone. It was about the people he had touched and how their stories had touched the world. Finally, he agreed. The hall filled with people from different countries, different struggles, and different walks of life. Cameras rolled. But what happened that night was not for the cameras. It was for the hearts sitting in the room. Ethan was the first to speak. He wheeled himself onto the stage holding his notebook. His voice trembled, but he looked straight at Keanu. "You told me I was not invisible," he said. "And now I draw every day not to hide but to be seen. Thank you." The crowd stood in applause. Then Raj stepped forward. He spoke about how one handshake changed his life. "My daughter now calls me her hero, and because of that, I walk taller every day." His eyes shone with pride, and the audience wiped their tears. Clara came next. Her story of despair and recovery touched everyone. "I thought I was forgotten," she said. "But one man told me I mattered. And because of those words, I am alive today." Maya, still recovering but full of life, walked carefully to the stage with the note Keanu had given her. She held it up for the audience to see. "This gave me courage," she said, "when I thought I had none left." And then the teacher from the small town spoke. She described how Keanu had come quietly, sat with grieving families, and helped them rebuild. "He did not come as a star," she said. "He came as a human being who cared." By the time they finished, the hall was silent. No one knew what to say because words felt too small. Then all of them, Ethan, Raj, Clara, Maya, and the teacher, walked together across the stage and stood beside Keanu. Keanu looked at them, his eyes heavy with emotion. He placed his hand over his chest and bowed his head. Then he spoke softly, but his words carried through the hall. "You all thank me," he said, "but the truth is, you gave me strength. Every act of kindness begins with pain, and every moment of kindness gives back hope. I am not the story. You are." The audience rose to their feet. People clapped, some cried, others simply stood in silence. It was not just applause for a man. It was respect for the idea that kindness, when given freely, could change lives across the world. That night became more than an event. It became a memory that traveled into homes, schools, and hearts. People who watched later online said they felt their lives shift. Some called their families. Some forgave old hurts. Some chose to give kindness to strangers the very next day. And so the story ended not with fame, not with power, but with something far greater. A reminder that kindness is the language every soul understands. And in that moment, Keanu Reeves left the world speechless.